Come back again. Come back again.
I'll marry you.
Have you ever wondered what happens when a courtroom turns into absolute chaos? One minute, everything's calm, and the next, a defendant is headbutting their lawyer or a grieving father leaps over the barrier to attack a smirking serial killer. These moments feel more like scenes from a wild movie than real life, but they happened, and they left everyone stunned. How can a place of law and order turn into something so unpredictable? Ted Bundy proposes to his girlfriend in court. Ted Bundy's trial was already one of the most infamous and intense courtroom dramas in history. Accused of a string of brutal murders, including kidnapping, rape, and murder, Bundy faced charges that could result in the death penalty. However, the trial took an even stranger turn when Bundy, acting as his attorney, did something no one expected. He proposed to his girlfriend, Carol Ann Boone, right there in the courtroom. Bundy had always been known for his ability to manipulate those around him. He was charming and often used his personality to sway people's opinions, which was evident even during his trial. While defending himself, Bundy called Boone a character witness. Boone had been a longtime supporter of Bundy and believed in his innocence, even while the gruesome details of his crimes were being laid out in court. Then came the moment that shocked everyone. As he was questioning Boone in the middle of a murder trial, Bundy asked her to marry him. It wasn't just a romantic gesture, it was a strategic move.
You want to marry me? I want to marry you.
Florida law at the time allowed for a marriage to be declared legally binding if it was made in court in front of a judge. Bundy knew this and took full advantage of the opportunity to make Boone his wife in the most unconventional and public way possible. The courtroom, already tense due to the horrific nature of Bundy's crimes, was thrown into further confusion. This wasn't just a typical courtroom. It was a scene filled with law enforcement officers, attorneys, and families grieving for the victims. Yet Bundy's boldness knew no bounds. He proposed with a calm and collected demeanor, as if nothing about his circumstances was unusual. It was almost surreal considering the gravity of the situation. Carol Ann Boone's response added to the shock. In front of the entire courtroom, Boone accepted the proposal, playing it out in the middle of one of the most high-profile murder trials in U.S. history. Boone, like Bundy, remained composed, despite the gasps and murmurs around her. Bundy's marriage proposal was not just a bizarre spectacle, it was also a tactical legal move. By getting married in court, Bundy may have thought it would somehow help his case or give him a semblance of control over the situation. However, this audacious act did little to change the outcome. Bundy was eventually convicted and sentenced to death for his crimes. He was executed in 1989. Penelope Soto flips off the judge in a bond hearing, Miami, Florida. In Miami-Dade County, an ordinary bond hearing turned into a viral courtroom moment when 18-year-old Penelope Soto completely lost her cool in front of the judge. Soto was facing charges for possessing Xanax without a prescription, a relatively minor offense compared to other cases that passed through the court system. Everything seemed to be moving along normally, with the judge setting her bond at $5,000, but what happened next shocked everyone. As the judge announced the bond, Soto responded with sarcasm. She smirked and said, "Adios" to the judge, dismissively waving as if she couldn't care less about the seriousness of the situation.
Bye-bye.
Adios.
The judge, clearly not amused, wasn't about to let that slide. He immediately called her back, sensing her disrespect, and raised the bond from $5,000 to $10,000. This was where things escalated.
Are you serious?
I am serious. Adios.
Visibly frustrated, Soto flipped off the judge and said "F you" in front of the entire courtroom. The once routine hearing quickly spiraled into a scene of disrespect and impulsive behavior. The courtroom, filled with legal professionals and other defendants, was momentarily stunned by the audacity of the young woman's actions. It was one of those moments where everyone seemed to freeze, not quite believing what had just happened. But the judge's response was swift and to the point. Without hesitation, he held Soto in contempt of court and sentenced her to 30 days in jail for her actions.
Oh, you did say that? I find you in direct criminal contempt. 30 days in the county jail.
Her impulsive outburst had now landed her in more serious trouble than her original charge ever would have. Van Terry attacked serial killer Michael Madison in court. In the Cleveland courtroom where serial killer Michael Madison was being sentenced for the murders of 3 women, emotions were running high. It was the sentencing phase, a time when victims' families had the chance to deliver their impact statements. One of those people was Van Terry, the father of Sherelda Terry, one of Madison's victims.
Van Terry. Father Sherelda Terry.
Van Terry stood before the court, addressing Madison, the jury, and the judge, trying to express the unimaginable grief of losing his daughter in such a horrific way. But as Terry spoke, something caught his eye. Madison was smirking. That smug look on Madison's face during such a solemn moment sent Terry over the edge. In a moment of pure emotion and heartbreak, Terry leaped over the courtroom barrier, lunging straight for Madison. His grief and anger boiled over in a way that no one could have expected, and he physically attacked the man who had taken his daughter's life. The courtroom, already heavy with the sorrow of the families, erupted into chaos. Security officers quickly restrained Terry, pulling him away from Madison, but not before the entire room witnessed the raw power of a father's anguish. The courtroom was stunned by the attack, but many sympathized with Terry. His actions, while against the rules of court decorum, were a raw and powerful display of the kind of grief no one should ever have to endure. As Terry was led away, people couldn't help but feel the weight of his pain. Madison, for his part, was quickly shielded by security, maintaining his emotionless expression throughout the incident. It seemed that not even a father's desperate rage could shake him. This lack of reaction only added to the eerie atmosphere that had surrounded Madison's trial from the beginning. David Moses falls asleep during his sentencing hearing. David Moses' sentencing in Kern County Superior Court was supposed to be a somber moment. Convicted of murdering an elderly woman during a robbery in Bakersfield, California, Moses was facing life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This was the moment when the judge would hand down the final sentence, and the courtroom was filled with the gravity of the crime. The victim's family was there, waiting for justice to be served, and the air was thick with emotion. But what happened next shocked everyone in the room. As the judge began reading out Moses' sentence, he yawned loudly, seemingly uninterested in the proceedings. It was an outrageous contrast to the severity of the situation. His behavior only got worse. Moses started laughing, further disrupting the courtroom and leaving people in disbelief. It was as if the entire weight of his crime, the pain he had caused, meant nothing to him. Then, in what felt like a final act of disrespect, Moses fell asleep. Right there, during his sentencing for murder, he leaned back and dozed off, as though the courtroom was nothing more than an inconvenient nap spot. His inappropriate and shocking behavior was so out of place, it left the courtroom in stunned silence. The victim's family, already reeling from the loss of their loved one, could hardly believe what they were seeing. Here was the man who had brutally taken a life, and instead of showing any sign of remorse or respect, he was yawning, laughing, and sleeping. It was an insult, not just to the legal process, but to the memory of the woman he had killed. The judge, visibly upset by Moses' lack of respect and empathy, continued with the sentencing, but it was clear the situation had deeply impacted the court. The seriousness of the sentence, life in prison without parole, was overshadowed by Moses' bizarre and careless behavior. Moses' actions during his sentencing will be remembered as one of the most disrespectful displays in a courtroom. His complete detachment and lack of remorse reflected an unsettling disregard for both the crime he committed and the pain he caused the victim's family. It's one thing to stand in court and face the consequences of your actions, but to treat the whole process as a joke, or worse, as a place to sleep, left everyone involved deeply disturbed. Ricky throws feces and urine across the courtroom. It was the kind of scene that seemed almost impossible to imagine. The courtroom, usually filled with formal decorum, was suddenly thrown into absolute chaos. As Ricky flung his bodily waste through the air, the room erupted into gasps and cries of disbelief. The smell alone would have been enough to make anyone wince, but combined with the pure shock of the act, it created an atmosphere of total disorder. Lawyers, court officials, and the jury were left scrambling, ducking and trying to avoid the mess, all while trying to maintain some semblance of control in what had become a surreal, disgusting moment. Everyone was stunned, but no one more than the judge. Judges are used to dealing with unruly defendants, But this was a whole new level of outrageous behavior. The judge, momentarily taken aback, quickly regained composure and demanded order in the court. Despite the chaos, the judge wasted no time in making it clear that Ricky's actions would not be tolerated. Extra security was immediately called in to restrain Ricky, and the trial was briefly paused so that the courtroom could be cleaned and order restored. In terms of legal repercussions, Ricky's outburst didn't just shock the people present, it also added to his troubles. His act of throwing feces and urine not only caused a massive disruption, but also led to additional charges of contempt of court. This kind of behavior is taken seriously and in many cases can result in extended sentencing or added fines. Ricky's case, already grim, became even worse after this disgusting episode. The courtroom staff and jury were no doubt shaken after the event, and it's safe to say that no one involved would forget this bizarre moment. What's worse for Ricky is that these kinds of outbursts often affect how defendants are perceived by the jury. Any sympathy or neutrality the jury might have held would likely have vanished in that instant. And while Ricky's case was probably difficult to begin with, his shocking behavior only solidified his position as someone completely out of control. Cody Jones attacks his lawyer in court. Cody Jones's bond hearing in Louisville, Kentucky, was supposed to be a routine legal proceeding. Jones, who was facing serious charges of attempted murder and assault, was hoping to get his bond reduced from $250,000 to $100,000. His lawyer, Cameron McCoy, was working hard to advocate for this reduction, presenting arguments to the court. But what happened next was something no one in the courtroom expected. As McCoy was explaining the bond reduction request, Jones became increasingly agitated. He started whispering to McCoy, urging him to push harder against the officer's testimony, feeling that his defense wasn't aggressive enough. You could feel the tension building, but no one was prepared for what came next. When McCoy didn't challenge the testimony the way Jones wanted, Jones completely lost his temper. In a shocking and sudden move, he headbutted his lawyer right there in the middle of the courtroom.
I hate, but you don't tell me what I'm saying. That's it. Give me my paperwork. I'm going back.
The courtroom was stunned. This wasn't just any outburst. This was an attack on his attorney, the very person who was trying to help him. The hearing, which had been progressing in a relatively calm and formal manner, was suddenly thrown into chaos. Officers quickly rushed to restrain Jones before things could escalate further, but the damage was already done. McCoy, though unharmed physically, was shaken by the attack. No one expects to be assaulted by their client, especially not during a hearing meant to help that client's case. The entire court seemed frozen for a moment, processing what had just happened. It was one of those rare instances where a defendant's frustration boiled over so much that they turned on the very person trying to support them. For many in the room, the incident was a reminder of how unpredictable courtroom situations can be. Defendants, often under immense stress and pressure, sometimes act out in ways that make their situations far worse. Jones, feeling cornered by the legal process, turned his frustration into violence, and it cost him dearly. This attack highlighted how even the best-laid defense strategies can be derailed when emotions run out of control. Joseph Zella elbows his lawyer. In a Florida courtroom, the tension was thick as Joseph Zella stood awaiting his sentencing for two brutal murders he committed decades earlier in 1990. It was a high-stakes moment. Zella, convicted of killing 11-year-old Robin Cornell and 32-year-old Lisa Story, was about to hear his fate. These weren't just any murders. They had haunted the community for years. Both victims were found brutally murdered in their apartment, and despite thorough investigations at the time, the case went cold. It seemed like the killer had vanished without a trace. For years, the murders of Cornell and Story were left unsolved, leaving behind a cloud of fear and mystery. The case stayed that way until 2016, when a surprising twist cracked it wide open. Zella, now in his 50s, was arrested for an unrelated minor offense. During the routine booking process, authorities collected his DNA, and it matched the genetic material found at the crime scene decades earlier. This discovery reignited the cold case, placing Zella squarely in the spotlight of a decades-old murder investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. Zella was arrested, brought to trial, and eventually convicted of both murders. But it wasn't until his sentencing hearing that things took a truly bizarre turn. In the courtroom, Zella sat quietly as his lawyer approached him for a final consultation before the sentence was handed down. No one expected what came next. In an instant, without warning, Zella suddenly lashed out and elbowed his lawyer square in the face. The courtroom was stunned. Judges, lawyers, jurors, everyone was left in a state of shock. Who attacks their attorney, especially at such a critical moment? The immediate reaction was chaos. Security rushed to restrain Zella as his lawyer reeled from the unexpected blow. The judge, caught off guard by the outburst, quickly demanded order in the court. While Zella's attack added yet another layer of drama to an already intense case, you could almost feel the tension in the room rise even higher as everyone wondered what Zella was thinking at that moment. Despite the disruption, the sentencing went ahead as planned. The judge, unfazed by Zella's violent outburst, delivered the verdict that everyone had been anticipating. For the gruesome murders of Robin Cornell and Lisa Story, Joseph Zella was sentenced to death. His attempt to derail the proceedings by attacking his lawyer did nothing to change the outcome. So, what are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell icon to keep up with the latest courtroom drama.